Imagine a world alive with energy, a tapestry woven with the threads of daily life. Europe in the early 14th century, a land of sprawling fields and nascent towns. Towns bustled, centers of commerce and community. Merchants called out in crowded markets, their voices a constant hum in the vibrant atmosphere, offering wares from distant lands and local artisans. And craftsmen shaped the world in their workshops, their skilled hands transforming raw materials into objects of beauty and utility. The clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the whir of the potter's wheel, these were the sounds of progress. Children's laughter echoed through narrow streets, a testament to the simple joys of life. Their games filled the alleyways with lightheartedness. While families and neighbors lived closely, their lives intertwined in a web of mutual support and shared experience. Bound by community and faith, their lives were anchored by the church and the traditions passed down through generations. The countryside's rhythms were set by the seasons, a predictable cycle of planting, growth, and harvest. Most people tilled the soil, their lives tied to the land, their fortunes rising and falling with the bounty of each harvest. The air was thick with the scents of bread, wood smoke, leather, the very essence of medieval life. And livestock, essential to both sustenance and trade. In grand cathedrals, incense marked the spiritual heart of society, a constant reminder of the divine presence in their lives. News traveled slowly, at the pace of a horse or a ship. Carried by merchants, their caravans snaking across the landscape, or wandering friars, spreading both the word of God and tidings from afar. Life felt permanent, an unchanging cycle of work, prayer and family. Its hierarchies ordained by tradition and God. A rigid social structure that defined everyone's place in the world. Daily routines followed the sun and church bells, dictating the rhythm of life from dawn till dusk. Peasants worked the fields, their backs bent under the weight of their labor. Lords ruled from castles, symbols of power and authority. Festivals and holy days offered rare moments of joy and release, a break from the hardships of daily life. Marriages, births, and deaths were communal, events that brought entire villages together. Marked by ancient rituals, passed down through generations, connecting them to their ancestors. Beneath this order, however, a storm was gathering far to the east, a dark cloud on the horizon. An unseen terror was stirring, a force that would soon shatter their world, destined to rewrite the fate of a continent, leaving an indelible mark on history. The people of Europe, secure in their routines, lived their lives unaware of the impending doom. Had no inkling of the catastrophe approaching, the devastation that awaited them. They stood unknowingly on the edge of an abyss, blissfully ignorant of the horrors to come. Their world about to be plunged into darkness, a darkness that would test the very limits of human endurance. The year is 1347, a time of kings and queens, knights and peasants, cathedrals reaching for the heavens, and fields ripe with harvest. But beneath the veneer of prosperity, a storm was brewing. A silent killer poised to unleash its fury upon the unsuspecting world. Whispers began to drift in from the east, carried on the winds and by weary travelers. They spoke of a mysterious, deadly pestilence, a sickness unlike any seen before, leaving devastation in its wake. At first these stories were dismissed as mere exaggerations, tall tales spun by frightened merchants and superstitious peasants. Europe was already preoccupied with its own troubles. Wars raged between kingdoms and famine stalked the countryside. The concerns from the east seemed distant and unimportant, but the rumors grew, becoming more persistent, more alarming. Reports trickled in of entire regions emptied, their populations decimated by an unseen force. Caravans were found lifeless, their goods untouched, their drivers and animals lying dead in the dust. Distance bred a false sense of security. Behind castle walls and within fortified cities, people felt safe. Surely, they thought, such horrors could not cross vast seas and towering mountains. They underestimated the tenacity of death. Then, in the autumn of that fateful year, 12 Genoese ships appeared on the horizon. They limped into Messina, Sicily, their hulls battered, their sails tattered, having sailed from the Black Sea. On board, sailors lay dying in agony, their bodies ravaged by an unknown illness. Their skin was covered in grotesque black boils, a horrifying symptom of the disease that consumed them. They were feverish and delirious, their minds clouded by the relentless progression of the sickness. The authorities, horrified by the sight, ordered the ships away, desperate to protect their city from the contagion. But it was too late. The damage was done. The plague had already arrived, slipping silently into the city's underbelly. It was carried by rats and their fleas, unseen passengers on the ships now unleashed upon the unsuspecting population. It was an invisible enemy, unstoppable in its advance and utterly devastating in its effects. From Messina, the pestilence spread relentlessly, like a wildfire consuming everything in its path. It swept through the coastal cities, consuming port after port: Genoa, Venice, Marseille. The sea, once a source of prosperity and connection, became a highway for death, carrying the plague from one unsuspecting city to the next. Every ship that arrived in port, every sailor who stepped ashore, was a potential harbinger of doom, carrying the seeds of destruction within their holds. The intricate trade routes that once connected Europe, bringing wealth and goods, now became the veins of its destruction, spreading the plague with terrifying efficiency. The continent, so confident in its strength and its future, faced an enemy it could not see, could not understand, and could not defeat. The shadow of death was no longer a distant rumor, it was a terrifying reality that had arrived on their doorstep. Europe's intricate web of commerce and connection, its pride and its strength had unwittingly become its undoing, accelerating the spread of the Black Death. The Black Death had breached the gates of Europe and nothing would ever be the same. The world was on the cusp of a transformation, a dark age unlike any other. The disease was a grotesque horror, a macabre spectacle of suffering and decay. It baffled physicians who clung desperately to ancient theories, their remedies proving utterly useless against this unprecedented scourge. They were lost in the face of something they couldn't comprehend. Bubonic plague brought swollen, blackened buboes, grotesque swellings that signaled impending doom. Victims were consumed by high fevers, and faced a swift, agonizing death, often within days of the first symptoms. Pneumonic plague attacked the lungs with brutal efficiency, spreading rapidly through the air and killing its victims in a matter of hours. It turned crowded places into death traps. Septicemic plague poisoned the blood, a swift and merciless assault on the body's defenses. It turned the skin black, a horrifying sign of systemic failure, and was almost always fatal. Survival was a rarity. In crowded, unsanitary towns and cities, the plague spread with terrifying speed, engulfing entire communities in a wave of death. Once it entered a household, few survived its deadly embrace. Families were decimated, leaving behind empty homes and broken hearts. Fear became constant, a pervasive shadow hanging over every aspect of life. Every cough, every dead rat, became a chilling sign of impending doom, fueling the ever-present terror. No one truly knew how it spread, only that it did, with relentless efficiency, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. The unpredictability of the plague bred constant dread. Divine wrath, poisoned wells, and astrological misfortune were all blamed as people desperately sought answers. Trust within communities frayed and shattered under the strain of the epidemic. The healthy shunned the sick, even members of their own family, driven by primal fear. The world turned upside down, its established order collapsing under the weight of death and despair. It was a world ruled by an invisible, merciless enemy, against which there seemed to be no defense. The psychological toll was immense, a deep and lasting trauma that scarred the collective psyche. In such a climate, no one felt truly safe, and the fear was palpable. The fundamental bonds that held society together began to unravel, leaving behind a fractured and broken world. The Black Death was a swift and terrible reckoning, a cataclysmic event that reshaped the course of history. It was an indiscriminate killer, sparing no one, regardless of status or age. Medieval cities, once vibrant, became landscapes of horror. Streets echoed with wailing, carts carried the dead, not goods. "Bring out your dead," became a chilling refrain. Plague-stricken houses were marked and sealed, families left to their fate. The stench of death filled the air, fear ruled every interaction. Public spaces, markets, churches became breeding grounds for infection. Community bonds snapped, neighbors and even parents abandoned the sick. Authorities, overwhelmed, tried quarantines and pest houses, but the dead outnumbered the living. Mass graves swallowed hundreds at a time. Dignity was lost to necessity. Survivors lived in constant trauma, their cities transformed into charnel houses. The familiar world was gone, replaced by suffering and dread. The urban dream had become a nightmare. The Black Death's devastation went far beyond individual loss. Entire villages vanished, fields lay fallow, and markets closed for lack of people. Society's structure buckled under the weight of mass mortality. Some survivors turned to reckless abandon, others to fervent religion, seeking meaning in chaos. Social order broke down. Families abandoned each other, trust evaporated. Priests and doctors died in droves, leaving communities leaderless. Government faltered as law faltered as officials perished or fled. Lawlessness and despair grew, the old certainties were swept away, the bonds of kinship and community shattered. Europe lost not just its people, but its coherence and sense of self. The world was turned upside down, teetering on the brink of collapse. The weight of death pressed on every aspect of life. The continent stared into the abyss of unprecedented catastrophe. Facing an incomprehensible enemy, people turned to faith, folk remedies, and desperation. Many saw the plague as divine punishment, organizing processions and public penance. Churches filled with supplicants, but the devout and sinner alike fell ill. Medical knowledge was primitive. Treatments like bloodletting and aromatic herbs did little. Plague doctors with their beaked masks became ominous symbols, some dedicated, many charlatans. Folk remedies and talismans abounded, offering false hope. Fear bred scapegoating. Jewish communities were falsely accused and persecuted. Violence and superstition added new layers of tragedy. In terror, reason gave way to fear, and hope became fleeting. The search for meaning and safety often led only to more suffering. The Black Death's most immediate impact was catastrophic loss of life, up to 60% of Europe's population. Fields lay fallow, villages stood empty, and the living were overwhelmed by the dead. The labor shortage upended the feudal system. Surviving peasants gained bargaining power. Lords, desperate to maintain their estates, competed for scarce workers. Serfdom weakened, as peasants demanded better conditions and higher wages. Many left ancestral lands for better opportunities, increasing social mobility. Attempts to freeze wages failed. The economic balance shifted. Landowners sought less labor-intensive farming like sheep herding, reshaping land use and industry. The economic landscape was transformed by necessity, not design. The Great Thinning created a vacuum, opening space for new realities. The old order was irreversibly changed. The plague's devastation forced Europe to adapt. Out of loss, new possibilities began to emerge. The Black Death was a catalyst for social and political upheaval. The old hierarchy crumbled as labor shortages empowered peasants. Demands for better wages and freedoms led to unrest and revolts, like the Jacquerie and the Peasants' Revolt. The nobility's power waned as incomes fell and estates struggled. Monarchs sometimes gained strength, stepping in to manage the crisis. The church's prestige suffered. Its inability to stop the plague led to doubt and criticism. Traditional authority was questioned as never before. Social mobility increased, and the lower classes grew more assertive. The seeds of future reforms and a more secular outlook were sown. The plague had shaken the foundations of medieval society. The trauma of the Black Death left a deep mark on European culture. Art became darker. Skeletons and the dance of death reminded all of mortality. Old certainties were shaken, making way for new ideas and a more empirical worldview. Losses among scholars and clergy opened doors for fresh perspectives. Economic shifts allowed patrons to support artists and thinkers. Humanism began to take root, focusing on human potential in the natural world. The seeds of the Renaissance were sown in the aftermath of catastrophe. Out of darkness, Europe began to rebuild, transforming itself and the world. The Black Death, though devastating, helped spark a new era of creativity and change. If you want to know more about the topic, I'll leave you a link in the description of the book, The Black Death, the world's most devastating plague.